All right, so again, we're doing this a little bit differently today. I've got the Mac up, but we're going to just keep going from right here. I want to keep this up all the time. Now, like it or not like it, what they have you build in here is they have you build another tip calculator. It's not identical to the one we created before. What I like about it is they actually show you in the second part of this how you can do some very cheesy kind of, but do some positioning to line stuff up, and they start to get into auto layout, which is something we're going to be getting into in a few weeks. All right, so I'd like everybody to do this. I'd like you all to go and click, bring up Xcode. All right, and I'm taking for granted we all remember, we all know how to do that. So start up Xcode. Once you do, as it says right there, and where are we? Well, hold on a second. This is part 2. I want part 1. All right. We're going to work with playgrounds in part of this thing. Now, it says here, this Swift tutorial will take you around 15 minutes. It probably would if I let you go and do it on your own. But since we're doing it as a class, it'll probably take most of the rest of the period. All right? So, in order to do this, again, once you've started up Xcode, as they mentioned here, go to File, in Xcode, go to File. I think that over the weekend, I'm going to have to try to go to the Mac store in Madison and ask them if they can check out the machine that I use. Because everything I try to do, I think I showed you this last semester, I get the little swirling circle that's all different colors, and it keeps doing it. And it's lasting longer and longer all the time. That's one of the reasons I didn't want to bring this up. All right, so under File, we're going to go to New, and under New, we're going to go to Playground. Now, by default, it should come up and it should give you a, it should probably call it My Playground. You can call it anything you want. All right, that's fine. If you want to leave it at My Playground, make sure it says iOS. All right. And once you've got that, click Next. And it'll ask you where you want to save it. Just save it right to the desktop if you would, please. So click the Create button. This is going to take a second. I already had it My Playground. So come on, stop it. Now, what it should say at the top of the screen then, I guess they don't even show it here, you'll probably have 3 lines of code in there. All right, it'll say a comment that says Playground, noun, a place where people can play, import UI kit, and var str equal hello playground. What you can do for right now is the line that says var str equal hello playground, just get rid of that line and keep the other stuff that's in here. If you wanted to, let's just keep it simple for right now. It'll get harder, believe me. But if we do this, and then hit enter, then hit enter, that should come up, and on the side of your screen then, it should show 7, 10, 17. Why don't you do that just to verify that indeed everything appears to be working the way it should. Okay? Anybody have any problem? Did it come up and say here? 7? It might take a little bit. 7, 10, 17. All right? Then everything's working fine in the playground. Again, this is a scratch pad. That's all it is. Remember, when you use var, you can change the value. I'm not telling you to do that, but you could come down here and you could say z equals 56, and it would work fine. But if you go and you initialize something using let and you try to change it again, you should get an error. All right? All right. Now, the way that we just did this, we could have also done it like this. Var x colon int equals 7. And I could have done that with one or more of these. So I'll just put it in there for all three of them. Y colon int equal 10. Var z colon int equals x plus y. We could have done that too. Again, the recommendation from Apple is that you don't do that. You use what's called inferred referencing, which is this way, not this way. But let's say that we wanted to add 3 variables. All right, so let's say we wanted to create those 3 variables and we didn't know what their value was and we didn't want to initialize them. You cannot just type in this. All right, you can't do that. All right, but I can come in there and do this. And I want you to do that right now. There's a reason for this. All right? So if I do this and I come back again and I put in here in the end, let's just say I initialize this, I'm going to get an error message. Does that make sense? Because x doesn't have a value and y doesn't have a value. All right? The reason I'm telling you this is when you code this enough, what's going to happen is when you start to create things, and you may remember this from last semester when we created interfaces and the like. All right? If you want to protect yourself, if you create a variable like this, and you want to, quote, protect yourself, unquote, let's forget about this one for right now. You can do this. You can put a question mark right there. All right? Again, that's still not going to help the error that you get because there is no value for x, there is no value for y. All right? What you're letting the system know, though, is it is literally possible that that value could equal nil, which is the same thing as no. All right? Now, there's a bunch of stuff that we could do in here. Hopefully you remember all this stuff. In fact, we looked at it the other day when we went over some examples. But for instance, if I say here, if x greater than 3, I'll give it a value just so you see this, like we had before. First of all, when I do this, whether I'm having one statement or multiple statements, I need curly braces. All right? I don't need parens. And if I want to say in here y equals -6, I don't need a semicolon. All right? That's all stuff. Really, you shouldn't be writing any of that stuff anymore. All right? But it's very anti-intuitive from most of the other classes that you've had in the past. All right? Now, let's say that, okay, if x is greater than 3, I want to print, let's just say I want to print this. All right, so I'm going to go back to where we had it at the beginning. So I'm going to say var x equals 7, var y equal 10, var z equals x plus y. All right, and let's say now I was going to come in here and I was going to make a bunch of checks. All right, so I wanted to come in and say if x greater than 3, it doesn't matter if I put the curly on this line or on the next line, it really doesn't matter. But I want to print its value. So print the value of x is, and remember how we do this then. You use a backslash and then in parentheses, so you do it like that with another paren on the end. It looks a little funky on the screen, but that has to start making sense to you. All right? So I'm just going to put that in here. Now, you might say, okay, I did that, Jeff. Nothing's printing on the screen. Okay? It may print on the screen, it may not, it probably won't. But you remember that towards your right-hand corner, the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you've got those 3 buttons. Do you remember the one on the left turns on and off the navigation pane? You know what I'm talking about? And if, Holly, I can help you in a second, but you know what I'm talking about? Click the one next to it, and that'll open the console window. Then you should see what you just put in. What's that?
It's showing \n on the...
Yeah, I don't know why it puts that in, and you're going to see it all the time. All right? But the point is, you can use print at any time if you're working in a playground and you want to check what's happening with different things. You can do that. Some of the stuff will print out automatically. All right? And also, like if you put in loops, what'll happen, you can't see it. It's very hard to see on the screen unless you've got better eyes than I have. So if you come through here and you write out a loop, typically nothing's going to show on the screen, but if you take your mouse, it'll say how many times it went through the loop. Like if you go 1 to 10, it'll say 10 times. If you put your mouse right next to where it says 10 times, there'll be a little eye there. It's almost clear. If you click the eye, then it'll show exactly what happened. So we're going to create this. So what I'd like you to do is, you see that line that's up there. Everybody take a look up on the screen right now. I want you to just put in this line and this line. Class tip calculator, curly, curly, nothing else. Don't worry about anything else that's in there. You can get rid of all the stuff you have, or you can comment it out. All right, but it's not going to help you running the program to have that stuff there. So you can highlight all of it and just hit delete. All right, or you can just, you really don't even need to comment at the top unless you want it for some reason. All right. So what we're doing is we're going to create the class and actually get it working inside of a playground. Then we'll take it and we'll create a project and we'll copy basically the class right from the playground right into our single view application. All right. The advantage of doing that is you got the scratch pad. You can make any changes you want at any time and you don't have to compile. All right, next. And we don't need these comments. You don't need the comment that says to, but, oops, come on. Put in this stuff right here. So notice we are not right here. In fact, I can make the text bigger too. It's not going to help right there, is it? All right. So you don't need the comment here. You can put it in if you want to, but you really don't need this. Okay. Notice we are not giving these initial values. Everybody hear that? We're not giving them initial values. So right in between the two curlies, put in those 3 lines if you would. Let total, colon, double. Let tax PCT, colon, double. And let subtotal double. Now, I don't know about you, but in mine, I get an error message at the top that says there is no initializer. They don't call it a constructor in this language. They call it an initializer. And unlike what we had in Java, one is not written for you automatically. Is everybody cool with what's happened right here? We just created 3 variables. Does that make sense to everybody? If you want, you could grab the quick start. Just give everybody a copy. If you would. Thank you. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. Now, what John's passing out is exactly what I have on the screen here. All right? So, since we don't have an initializer, the next thing to do is to make an initializer. So that's right here. Again, let me highlight it. Let me change the size. All right? So you can put that right below your variables. And then we're going to come back and talk about it. You mean the ones we set up the X and Y and stuff?
No, the let total.
We're going to play with all that stuff in just a minute.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Ended up with a couple extras, I don't know how.
Okay, thanks. Now, what should happen after you put all that stuff in is any error messages that you've had should go away. All right, so if you do have error messages, and if they don't make any sense to you, please raise your hand. If you look up on the screen here, I think you all know this already. You can put spaces in there. I don't want a capital I, but you can put spaces in there if you want to. You can line everything up if you're real anal and you want everything to be, it doesn't matter. All right, that'll work just fine if you want to do all that stuff. So again, I'm on, it looks like around page 6 on that handout. And there's 12 pages in the handout. But I wanted to go through this stuff, if for no other reason, to try to get this back in your heads. Plus to let you see last semester about the only thing that we actually did inside of a playground were things like var x equals 7, var y equals 10, var z equals x plus y. But you can actually build an entire application inside of a playground. But you can't actually execute it. The way that this works is you type something in and immediately it runs it. All right, there is no tool, at least yet, that Swift has that says, you know, there's no tool that automatically you can push a button or run it through something and have it change from a playground file to a .swift file. That just doesn't exist right now. So what are we doing here? Well, look at it. The initializer is supposing that we're going, so when we create an instance of this, an instance of what? An instance of tip calculator. When we create this in a bit, when we create that, all right, that's saying that when we call its initializer, we're going to have to pass in two values. They're both doubles. One is going to represent whatever our total is that we paid for our bill, and the other one is the tax on that bill. Does that make sense? So maybe my bill was $50 and the tax is 10%. All right? So then self.total, that, you were asking your question, Luke, that number, that right there, that is grabbing the value that we're going to pass in, and now it's going to put a value into here. Same thing, that one will put a value into there. Now that should make sense to everybody. It really should. All right? And then the last one is going to take that total. So say we put in $50. All right? It's going to divide that by, if we put in 10%, it'll divide it by 1.1. So that's going to figure out what they call as our subtotal. Right? Does all that make sense? So in other words, if our bill was $50 and we had a 10% tax on it, that should come out to $5. Does all that make sense? All right. So again, we're not worrying about final totals. That's our subtotal. But they mentioned stuff here. I don't want to sit and read to you. But they talked about what the initializer is. It's called init, etc. And notice, because it's important, just like with constructors, you can overload them. You can have several different ones. So what I could have done is I could have created another initializer here where I don't pass anything in. But if I did that, then I wouldn't have to use the word self. But I could say, for example, I could just put in default values. Like I could say total equals 100, tax percentage equals 10, something like that. That would work just fine. Yes?
Is there a reason why you're not using self or subtotal? I mean, shouldn't use
Down here, the question is there a reason that you're not using self? The answer is we're not passing it in.
Oh, example.
See, what we're doing is we're calling the same thing that we're passing in, the same name as our variable up on top.
It's confusing.
So the other way too, and it's a great question, it really is. If I had called this, for example, tote, and called that tax, I wouldn't need the word self here. Does that make sense to everyone? We only need it because we're using the same name both times. You don't have to do that. Some people just have that ingrained, they just do it that way. Because then it's sending a signal to them. That double there is going to be passed into that double there. If it's easier for you to do it that way, then you have to use the self. If you don't want to do it that way, you don't have to. We could have just made it easy and called it just T or T1 and T2, whatever. You know, it's just like with any other language. All right? And they also talk about it, kind of goes back to your point here, Zane. Notice there's no name conflict with subtotal. All right? All right. All right. Now, you don't have to type this in because they're saying, in case you're wondering where this subtotal comes from, all right, they're explaining to you exactly what they're doing right there. But it's the same explanation I just gave you. All right. Then it says, add this code after wherever you are right now. Go down and add this after it. All right, so let's add that, and then we'll come back and look at that. And good, bad, or indifferent, hopefully what you're noticing is you're typing stuff in. The IntelliSense in here is kicking in all the time, and sometimes it's giving you what you want, sometimes it's not. All right? Now, when we look at this, I know some of you type faster than others. The word init is a method. Okay, it is a method. It's a bit. I'm not going to say exactly it's a built-in method, but it's something the system realizes and recognizes. Most other methods that you create in this language must start with func, F-U-N-C. You may have noticed already because I do it all the time. I type real fast. Maybe I never told you this story. It's very short. I went, my first degree is in journalism, and I went in for a job interview at a newspaper. And of course, I was a smart ass, but I thought I was funny with what I said. And the guy said, "How fast can you type?" I said, "It depends." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Do errors count?" He didn't find it funny. Okay? I didn't get offered the job, and the interview didn't really last that long after that. But the point is, if you put F-U-N-C-T in there, you're going to notice it's not going to be purple anymore. All right? It's going to go to black. All right? This, of course, is the name, right? Maybe that's a big name, but it's still, that's the name they used. I didn't write this. So calc with tip percentage. You're passing in a tip percentage right here. And remember, this is how you denote a return type. You put a minus sign followed by a greater than sign, followed by the type of variable that it is you want to return. And since you are multiplying a double times a double, it's a pretty safe bet that you're going to be returning a double. This is the most type-safe language I have personally ever worked with. And what I mean is this, just so you know. Let's say, for example, that this had been an int, and I had, then let's say these were both ints. But for some reason here, instead of typing in int, I typed in int 32, which is just a bigger int, right? I'd get an error message. It wants everything to be the same type, to the point where if it's not, it wants you to cast it so it is the same type. It's believing that it wants the playing field to be totally fair. All right from the get-go. As it says, this is a function that determines the amount to tip by multiplying the subtotal by the tip percentage. All right, then after this, we can add this underneath that. Question?
Yeah, I keep saying inside the curly braces. Is that coming from that all inside this init?
Pardon? Yeah, everything is. You've got the class tip calculator at the top with a curly brace. Then there should be a curly brace at the bottom. This is all part of the class. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got an error. It's saying the initializer may only be declared within a type for that init total double text.
Okay, well, John can try to look at it, and if he can't figure it out, I can try to look at it too. All right, let's put this one in. Believe it or not, we're almost done. All right, so let's put in this one, and then we'll take a look at this. You don't know it, John?
No.
All right, I'll be right there then. Let me just key the rest of this in, and then I'll be right there.
helpful.
Did John figure out? No? Okay.
Oh.
Oh, where's your class line at the top of the program that said class tip calculator?
I didn't set one up, I just went
Okay.
to my playground, but.
Yeah, in where you are, right underneath where it says import UI kit, put another blank line right there, and type in class, space, all lowercase, class space, capital T, little IP, all right, and then big C, and then the rest of it calculator. All right, now you're gonna need a forwards, left curly. It'll put a right one in too, but then just remove the right one if it puts one in. That should get rid of everything that was in there.
Okay.
Mistake. Now, it looks like something's at the
Oh.
bottom.
Oh, I got
You have
Matic
to
earlier.
add one.
Okay,
Beautiful, thank you.
all right. Has everybody been able to get that done? All right. And again, it might seem like a simple example, but I'm trying to get us back on track, okay? And then what we'll probably end up doing Tuesday is doing part 2 of this, or maybe we'll even start it today. And in part 2, they show you 2 different ways. Remember last year when we had to do that control drag? All right, they show you another way to do it. And the second way they say to do it, that's how I screwed mine up. I was doing this last night. You were all lucky because, well, I don't know if it's lucky, but Law and Order was a rerun. All right.
Oh.
So I had myself some time to go and do that. All right. So here we've got a function, print possible tips, that requires no parameters. And this function is going to call the calc tip with tip percent 3 times. Does that make sense? So in other words, I don't care what our bill is, but let's just pretend again it's $50. So it's saying, how much should we tip if we leave 15%? How much should we tip if we leave 18%? How much should we tip if we leave 20%? Does that make sense? All right, hopefully that does. Now I'll tell you what I did in my zest or zeal for trying to type this in fast, not realizing it. Up there where we created that calc tip with percent, up there where we just did that, I left the H off. Then I couldn't figure out why this wasn't working. And I'm like, this is all spelled correctly. So I went over and looked down the side where you've got the red X, and when you click on that, it gives you a message. Typically, that's at least a good starting point if it doesn't figure out the problem for you. All right?
So I'm sure I know the answer, but it's showing up in red because it's integer, correct?
This is showing up in red because it's inside of a string. Strings show up in here in red. In this editor, strings show up in red. Everything between double quotes shows up in red.
See, but only part of mine is only the 15, the initial 15.
Here,
Yeah,
did you make sure yours is closed like this?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not sure. I can take a look at it, but
Oh, no, I'm just like, it's
Yeah,
not all in
write
red.
a string. And then the rest of that's not a string.
all right. Now, this is what's left before we do this. Okay, so please don't do it yet, but before you do this, add this code to the bottom of the playground, right here. But this code, do not put this code in the curly braces. So what this is going to say is we want to create a brand new tip calculator object. Our total is going to be $33.25. Our tax is going to be 6%. So if we do this right, all right, we've got what, $33.25, and the tax then would be 1 point times 1.06. Does that make sense? All right. We're not even worried right now about the, bless you, about the final total. That's actually in the next tutorial. Okay? And then we have to take that and multiply it by, in this case, all right, so go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna ask you a question, like, this is it says total, then the number is passing through?
Yes.
Right? Do you have to actually put total there, or do you just put a number?
Question was, do you have to put the word total there, or can you just do it with number? I'm going to give you a political answer. You can leave it off, but then you have to put it in a different way.
Oh.
All right? It's expecting, this is very similar to what you've seen in other languages, but in other languages, sometimes you're used to just putting in a parameter name, sometimes you're used to putting in a type, but typically in here you put both in. And again, it all goes back to that thing with type safety. What it's saying is, this is your variable, all right, and this is its value. It's going to check right away to make sure it's of that type that's been defined before, all right? So, what this should do, all right, what this should do is when you put both these in, what you should see on the side of your screen are what you would be paying for 15%, for 18%, and for 20%. All right? Did you have another question?
Yeah, I mean, so the total tax PCT has to match the function?
It has to match the type.
The type.
Right, and since we're calling that function is expecting, if you remember, double-double.
Yeah, but I mean, the total and the tax PCT are the same thing that's in the initialization as well, that
Yes.
you get using there, so that has to say total?
In here, it has to say total. Where we wrote it in here, we could have called it really anything we wanted to, just like in any other programming language.
And those two don't have to match though?
No. So that's the actual parameters. The formal parameters don't have to be that name. All right, so just like you, I'm typing in these 2 lines of code. Whoops. There.
So are we supposed to put that outside of the init function, the total double type and all that, or at the very bottom?
Are you talking about what's on the screen right now?
Yeah.
That should be outside of the curly braces. That is the call to this class. You, in the first line there, you are instancing or instantiating an instance of the class, and in the second one, you're calling one of its methods.
Okay. Yeah.
When you did that, did you see the values that printed up above? Here's the whole program right here. All right, but I don't know if that's considered to be too big or not for you. Yes, November, print possible tips. Funk, print possible, yeah, looks it's there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tip calculator total. Value of tip calculator. Count dot, print possible tips, yes, November. wouldn't matter, but. Double check, it might look like to me like she had the same thing I had. Found something?
No, I guess not.
Says has no member, print possible tips. So what it is over here, she's got curlies. It's, I wonder, I mean, this is gonna sound really stupid.
Well, that's what I told Luke to do a bit ago.
See how it went away?
No?
Okay, see that?
Mm-hmm.
But now, that's weird.
Same.
No, same thing. So that's actually good. That would have been really freaky if that would have been what the problem was. Okay.
Well, we can look at it if you want to carry on.
Yeah. Well, just I don't know what to tell you. We'll get it to work, Holly. All right. So this is the whole program right here. It's smaller, but you can see all of it. You can map yours up, and if you look up on the screen right here, this is what should be printing out. Now, we've done no formatting, so it's ugly as hell, 4.705, etc., and you still got the \n's in there. But take a look at the stuff that's here and make sure that yours looks like this. All right? Once you've gotten to that point, take a break. John, you know what she may want to do too? It sounds stupid, but I've seen this happen in Xcode. The line where she's creating that function for the print possible tips, remove the line and retype it in.
Oh, okay.
No, and sometimes you don't realize it, but when you typed it in, you hit a control character. You hit and it puts some kind of an invisible character in there. That's all I can think of. I didn't see anything that looked wrong on hers.